Welcome to another episode of Southern Arizona's Nonprofits, the superheroes impacting our community. We're broadcasting live today on the Tucson Business Channel, a division of Mark Bishop Media, and we're from the Stewart Title Corporate Offices on Broadway in Tucson, Arizona. This show is brought to you by SCIP, SSCIP, the Social Service Contractor Indemnity Pool, ensuring nonprofits like ours for nearly 4 decades. I'm Barbara McClure, the Executive Director of Impact to Southern Arizona, host of the show, and with me today are 2 people representing organizations that focus on children, offering a wide array of services, but here today to speak primarily on their work to help folks avoid substance abuse, and another organization supporting foster care and doing far more than just children, but we'll learn all about that. So please welcome me in joining Mr. Darien Mathews. He's the Coalition Coordinator for the Copper Corridor with Arizona Youth Partnership. Welcome, Darien.
Oh, thank you so much, Barbara.
Thank you for joining today. And also we have Ms. Tiane Kennedy. She's the PR and Development Director at GAP Ministries. Thank you, Tiane.
Great to be here.
Yeah, we're so glad you're joining us, especially right before the Thanksgiving holiday. Just before the show started, we were talking about turkeys and Thanksgiving. So we'll just wish all of you a happy Thanksgiving as well, even though you're going to be listening any time of year. So I think what I'm going to do is start with Darien because he comes to us from the Copper Corridor, and Impact serves the Copper Corridor, and we often get asked, what is that and where is it? So Darien, how about a brief history or information for the listeners?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I know a lot of people have that. So really the Copper Corridor is on Highway 177, Highway 77. And it's small communities, about 9 of them, from Superior to Oracle. So you have Superior, Kearney, Hayden, Winkleman, Mammoth, San Manuel, and then Oracle, and a few smaller communities in between.
And why is it called the Copper Corridor?
Oh, well, famously known for its copper.
Sure.
We know that there are many mines in the Copper Corridor, and thankfully they do employ many of the residents there, but it is known for its copper, hence the name.
Sure. And I think what's interesting is in its heyday, I moved here in 2008, but prior to that, it was a booming town. I mean, that whole corridor was really booming with all kinds of copper production. And I think, is it only down to one operating mine right now?
Yeah, well, there you have ASARCO, and then you also have Resolution Copper as well. Yeah.
So it was tough on the community as the copper kind of dwindled, or at least the production of it there, or the mining of it. Mm-hmm. So what is it that you're doing in the Copper Corridor? What is AZYP doing for the families who live there?
That is a great question, too. So really the goal of the coalition there is to help reduce youth substance use in the Copper Corridor. And it's been had a major impact, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, where youth use has increased, and they've found more creative ways, unfortunately, to get their substance use. So we really try to educate and then, of course, collaborate with other organizations to help reduce youth use. And then, as a community, really champion healthy choices.
That's one of the best things about AZYP. Impact to Southern Arizona, when I became the director at that place, actually AZYP had an office in our building along with Amphi. So we partnered with AZYP quite a bit and used a lot of the family programs you're talking about. And I think those really made a difference, we noticed, in our community. So that's exciting that you're there. And what kinds of things are you doing? Well, when you say it's a community coalition, who are you drawing in as part of that?
So really it's from all different sectors. Typically in a coalition that helps to reduce substance use, there's 12 different sectors that work together. So you can think of, parents, education, law enforcement, you have medical professionals that are involved, and so many more. And we're really pulling from the entire community, so that way we can pull resources for our youth and work together as a community.
That's very nice. And are you finding a lot of those resources in the Copper Corridor?
It's growing, but there's always a need for more. As you know, there's not too many resources for our youth nor adults in the Copper Corridor, so many have to drive to Tucson or go into the valley for these resources, whether it has to do with getting treatment, behavioral health services. So we really try to partner with other organizations to bring those resources closer to them.
Sure. Gosh, that's got to be a challenge. I know one of the biggest barriers our clientele have is transportation. And I was recently up in Hayden in the Copper Corridor, and there is no transportation. And the young man that we were with, even he had never been on the road from Catalina up to Hayden, from coming up from the south. He'd always gone from Hayden around to the 60 and down through Florence. So he was surprised at how open it was and how there was nothing between these little towns. So I mentioned transportation as a challenge, but it's interesting that they can still find the materials for substance abuse, especially with few markets around.
Yeah, it has been quite a challenge, but it's nice that we're under the umbrella of Arizona Youth Partnership, because really as a nonprofit, they're looking at the bigger picture. And then, of course, they get federal funds in order to bring those resources in to some of these smaller communities.
Sure, that's terrific. Well, and I know, Tiane, your organization also provides a lot of resources for people. And I'm sure even for the Copper Corridor, would the Copper Corridor families be able to come use some of the GAP ministry services being in Pinal County, or you?
You know, we pretty much stay south of Pinal County.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, some of the things we do serve Santa Cruz, and I'm trying to think of some of the others, but we've kind of had a boundary of Pinal and services going from even our foster care. We have licensing for south of there. For our community warehouse, we have an agreement with Good 360 that we serve south of Pinal County. So no, we don't really, anything that I can think of, serve in that area.
Sure. We used to have that at Impact because we were right at the county line and we had some Pima County funding. And so our board was really nervous about going north and what would happen and how would it affect funding. But we, Impact really has only about 7% of its budget from grants. So we were fortunate to be able to find other funding to get into the Copper Corridor. So that's exciting. But I know sometimes those county barriers, those invisible lines in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's so many needs south, too.
Oh, there are.
When you start going into the south, there's a lot of needs, too. So at some point you just go, okay, this is our ground that we're going to try to help, and that's all we can do for now.
Sure. And for us, it works for us because Impact is in Catalina. So we're kind of right in the middle. We're on the county line, essentially, so we get to go both directions. Mm-hmm. Well, what are some of the resources that GAP Ministries offers the community?
Well, GAP is primarily, I know we've had people call us before about shelter and that type of thing, because sometimes we get listed. We do so many different things that people often are confused about what we do and who we are. And most of the things that we do, we have a specific clientele that we serve. For instance, shelter, it's foster kids. Mm-hmm. So we only take in people that are put with us through the Department of Child Safety, our group homes, and our foster families. But we have branched out in the last 2 years with our community warehouse. And so that's something, we really started getting items in food and other basic needs items to serve our kids and the populations that we serve. But then we had an excess of it. And so it's been really awesome to be able to share with others. And we still haven't figured out a way to make that, especially the community warehouse, make it pay for itself.
Sure.
But it's okay because it's just been really something to be able to share with so many people that have so little, especially over the last 2 years. And we have had some funders come in and help with it because we opened it up during COVID to all the foster families, adoptive families, kinship families in the city and the surrounding area. Even though it wasn't our families, it was just anybody that's serving foster kids could come and get things. And then from there, we've expanded it to anybody with access. Mm-hmm. They can come and get things. And then military, both active or retired veterans, seniors 60 and over, refugees. They actually fall under the access because they do have access, but we serve some refugees. So we've opened it up, and we actually have shopping days where they can come to the community warehouse and get things that they need.
That is very special. I know during the pandemic, a lot of things did change. Even I noticed it even in the food bank the qualifications were a little relaxed and even extended to capture more people who were struggling.
Yeah.
So that's nice that those services were open to all those groups of people.
It was neat because last year we even were contacted by Toys for Tots, and they've always done Christmas time through the Marines.
Yes.
And this year they decided they have a new executive director and they wanted to do something during the middle of the year. So they had a toy distribution in July, and we were able to partner with the police, Tucson Police Department, and get it out to bunches of kids. So that was, just doing some things to cheer people up when it's been a tough year or two for families, especially all the families taking care of kids at home and homeschooling and all.
I know, I can hardly imagine myself. I have 3 grown boys, but I was really feeling for those parents. We had a lot of parents come into Impact who were just struggling to be home, not having enough resources, but even just to manage the kids. How about your kids up in the Copper Corridor that you were dealing with, Darien? Did you have a lot of that too? I'm sure those children up there were being homeschooled as well, weren't they? Were the schools closed?
Yeah, I think that's been a hard transition for a lot of the youth up there.
Sure.
Because here they were used to being around their friends, and many were now homeschooled, and it was really a back and forth because then some of the schools went back to in-person, and then they had a few cases, and then they had to go back home. So you can imagine the stress levels of the kids. So it was really important to us to really reach out and to be able to get them the help that they need, and the parents as well, because everybody at that point in time were dealing with a lot of trauma, from this pandemic. So we're able to provide parents the resources that they need in order to speak with youth. We really wanted to encourage family time too. Seems to be a lost art where family no longer talks around the table. So that's one of the programs that AZYP offers is Stronger Families Project, which is incredible. You really get an opportunity to facilitate between parents and youth conversation, open up dialogue. So youth can understand from their parents' perspective what they're going through, and same parents with youth.
I can attest to that because we partnered. That was one of the programs we did at Impact. And we would provide a family dinner. And so we'd provide the dinner, and then, like you say, the youth would come in and the parents would come in. And it's very interesting. I like the way do you still separate them where the parents are with one counselor learning about things and the students are in another room?
Yeah.
That is such a clever idea, I think, because, kids don't necessarily want to talk about the same kinds of things when their parents are present. And especially if it's around substance abuse, I would imagine. Yeah,
it's definitely important to be able to look at both sides of the coin,
sure,
so to speak. And that's what we really do with our coalitions too. So we have a separate adult coalition, a separate youth coalition, and then we have the two work together in all communities. And that way the youth can be able to speak to their peers. The adults can collaborate and understand what resources they need to pull in to help their youth. And that way it's a collective effort.
That's very cool. Are your classes usually with the kids done after school? Or, I'm assuming they're so connected to school. That really must have been a challenge while the pandemic was going on.
Yeah.
So how did you do that? Or how do you normally do it, and how did you have to adapt?
That's a good question. So normally we would be in the schools. Okay. So an example is we have our Too Good for Drugs curriculum by the Mendez Foundation, and we'll go into schools, especially since it's evidence-based. We know that it works for our youth in the Copper Corridor, and the schools loved it too. But then we, of course, would have to adapt and try to do things online. We did that for many of our curriculum and programs, and many were successful, during that time.
Sure.
But now things are getting back a little more back to normal, where some of the schools are now allowing the programs to come back in, and we're able to go in and help to educate the youth once again with these programs.
Very nice. Do you find there's more alcohol abuse than drug abuse, or is it the same program for both?
It's different for every community, which makes it a little bit of a challenge in the Copper Corridor. For example, in Superior, most of the youth identify that alcohol is the major substance of use among their peers. But then I just had a conversation in Kearney this morning with the youth, and they said, well, vaping is the issue. So we have to be educated on all these substances in order to educate our youth.
And I think vaping is tough because there's this idea with both adults and children that it's safer than smoking. And it may be different than smoking, but I try to tell a lot of the kids it's really something to avoid. It's the best choice to avoid it, but that is interesting. What about other like narcotic drugs? We hear so much about opioids and things. Do you have kids that you're dealing with that with as well?
Yes, and unfortunately we see a major trend. I think this is all over the county with fentanyl. And we know that fentanyl, again, is an opioid. But what a lot of kids don't realize is that it's being laced with the common substances that they do use. For example, oxycodone or a Percocet. Even in marijuana, it's being laced now. And why we're seeing so many overdoses. Just in 2020, there was over 60, kids that overdosed. And we're really trying to not just help educate and bring awareness, but help them to find more positive ways to either cope with the stresses that they're experiencing or to how to resist peer pressure.
Sure. That's a challenge. It's a big challenge. It's a good thing you're up there doing that. Thank you. Tiane, what about some of the struggles with foster kids? I mean, I'm sure you have foster kids having the same kinds of stress, but I love what Gap Ministries does for fostering. And maybe you could talk about some of that, all the programs you do, the support for foster parents and foster kids. The whole system is incredible.
Well, it was interesting. For instance, ever since the pandemic, the state and probably everywhere is extremely low on foster homes. We don't have nearly enough. A lot of families that had licenses backed out and just said, we don't want to take kids right now during 2020 because everybody was trying to protect their own families. So that made it very difficult, and we still have not gained enough families for all the kids. A lot of kids are being shipped to other counties because of it. It was an interesting year in so many ways. When parents talk about homeschooling, we have up to 10 kids in each of our family-style group homes with couples, house-parent couples. And you just think, gosh, it was hard enough to homeschool 3 kids. Try 10.
In all grade levels?
Yeah, all grade levels, difficult backgrounds, usually behind a year or 2 in school, just so many things. And then they were quarantined to the houses, so we had to have our kitchen and our community warehouse people delivering to them. So it was really interesting. Plus, the other stress for the kids was they couldn't do supervised visits with their parents. So all the visits were done online.
Oh, that'd be hard.
It is. You're already going through a lot, and then you can't see your mom and dad or your siblings, because sometimes in the supervised visits, it's your chance to connect with your mom and a brother or sister. So it was a tough year for the kids. I don't know, when they're in our homes, they're not doing any kind of drug abuse. We do have a women's home miracle center that, that's what women are healing from.
Sure.
So it's something in our society right now that is just, I have a niece who's 2 years sober from heroin addiction, and it affects every family. She's a graduate of Texas A&M. I mean, it's not kids with a very, I'm not going to go into all her details, but, a highly educated, very smart girl just got in with the wrong kids doing Oxycontin, and from there it goes on to the other stuff. So,
and it's hard to get those. Excuse me, I think heroin and meth, we've had some clients on that and in those tracks. And once they get there, it's so hard to get out. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting because we used to say some of those drugs that are really expensive. I mean, it isn't the poor kids who are on drugs. It's kids of all ages and all economic backgrounds, because the kids who have money have accessibility. And so that is tough. Yeah. Like I say, a lot of college students kind of get lost on that track. So good news that she's back and found her way. That's wonderful.
But all around, it's been a good year. I feel like Gap, but people have been very generous, so that's been helpful. I feel like a lot of people in the community in the last 2 years have realized how fortunate they are, and fortunate they had the life they had. They didn't lose their job or have to close their business. or,
Sure.
So many things that impact the poor so much more. And so people have been really good about coming alongside us and helping. And I think the kids are doing great. They're back to doing visits with their families, and houses are pretty stable, so it's been a blessing overall.
Sure, that's a nice answer. I think it's just tough for kids. I really feel for the kids, like you say, during that idea or that whole pandemic. I was thinking about your comment about kids who have to be moved to another county, because that's got to be tough. They're moved away from their siblings, and like you're saying, if they don't have that connection with their biological parents. So do you have an idea on how many children that is in our area?
I don't. I was talking to the foster care director, and she just said, if you're going to go on the radio, just tell people we desperately need we need house parents also at GAP, but we definitely need people to go through training and licensing to become foster parents.
Is that a difficult thing to do? It sounds daunting. I mean, maybe to me. Does it sound daunting to you, Darren?
It does
Darren?
sound difficult.
The state, and I've been doing this 10 years. I've been in this in the foster care arena, and the state has made it so much easier than it used to be, because you had to do the classes. It's 10 weeks of classes, and it had to be in person for both husband and wife. And so if you had kids at home, you had to get a babysitter. If you have a wife that works different shifts, or a husband, it was very hard. And now they've done a lot of them online. So they've really simplified them. So getting your license isn't that hard. It's not that daunting. I think what is kind of daunting is all the rules and regulations, that you have to have a fence around your pool, and you have to have locks on all your cabinets. There's a lot of things like that. You have to jump through hoops. But I think the thing that's probably the most daunting for people is the fear of the unknown, and not knowing what it's going to be like, and misconceptions about foster kids, that they're delinquents, or something like that they're going to be holy terrors in their house. And sometimes they are, I'll be honest.
Sure.
But for instance, we just had a little boy who was 5, and he was really tough. The good thing about him was there was no honeymoon period. He just jumped right in and was horrible. And so if you can get through that, you can make it. And he recently, just a young couple had him, and they were going to have him temporarily because it was an emergency placement. And within 2 weeks, they said, we want to adopt him. We love him.
Oh,
and the adoption,
nice.
It's been a year. We just went through in September. They have another little boy. He looks like the dad. And it's just those kinds of stories just make you so happy.
Oh, sure. What a change in his life,
Yeah.
for sure. That's wonderful.
So,
Well, it's nice, I think, to talk about what it's like to become a parent, because I think if you have the need for foster parents, or if Arizona, and specifically Pima County, has a need for foster parents, it's good that people know that and maybe what's involved. So 10 weeks goes by quickly, right? Where will we be 10 weeks from now? I mean, it's just, we keep thinking 2022 once sounded so far away, and now it's tomorrow. Feels that way.
well, and a lot of times you can do respite too, which right now we actually need a couple that would be willing to be respite house parents. So that we have 8 houses, each of them has house parent couples. And so when they have to go on vacation, or they have a family illness, or they have to go home for a funeral, or whatever it may be, just normal life things, we really could use a respite couple that comes in and watches the kids temporarily. So those are some of the things that people can do, kind of get their toes wet, but not jump in full force.
Well, that's a neat opportunity also. So you're not bringing the foster children into your own home. You're going to a facility
Yes.
and playing that role. So that really does make it even easier, probably, for a lot of
Right.
our listeners who might consider doing something like that.
And it's just to make it clear, because people's idea, I think, of group homes is a facility or kind of a little orphan Annie place. But
Sure.
it's honestly, all the houses that we have, I could live in any of our homes. They're lovely. They're decorated beautifully. We just got some donations from Pottery Barn and Costco, and we just redid a lot of the rooms because they take a beating with 10 kids.
Sure.
But they're homes, and, the family sits around a table and does homework, does meals together. So the kids come in. And one of the benefits of a group home that people don't think about also is that we can keep siblings together.
Yes.
Because a lot of times in foster families, you're only licensed, or you only feel capable to take one foster child. So you have a sibling group of 5 come in. They're each in a separate foster home. So over the years, when we could take all 5 kids and kind of shuffle kids around in different houses as kids left and have them all together, if you can't have your mom and dad, at least if you have your siblings, makes a big difference.
Sure. We have a family on our street who adopted 5 siblings. They started with the idea of just 1 or 2. And then when they met them all, it was the same thing. They said they all have to stay together. And they moved into a larger house and opened that house. So
I love that.
That was pretty exciting. Yeah, but it seems like quite a calling. So if somebody is interested in maybe being I forget what you called it, but like the substitute, the respite care, the respite family, then how do they go about that? Do they contact GAP?
They do. There's 2 different types of respite. You can be a respite for foster kids where they would come to your house.
Okay.
And that would be on our foster side. So if you go to GAP and look at the foster care side, or in our group home side, which is called Splash.
Okay.
We call them Splash Homes. It stands for Spirit Powered Love, Aggressively Shaping Hearts.
Oh, very nice.
So people always say, what are they, like water or something?
I know, I saw that and thought that was interesting.
But our Splash side is where we need people that would be respite to go in the house as like a respite couple. But if they contacted us and said they were interested, we'd get them to the right people.
Okay, so that's one part of the volunteers that you need in your group.
And that's not even volunteers, that's paid.
Oh,
well,
it is paid.
Being a foster parent isn't paid, although the state does pay you something to care for kids. But the Splash Respite is a paid position.
Oh, okay, that's interesting to know. How about you, Darien? What kinds of volunteers does the coalition need? Or do you have a call for volunteers for your program? Maybe not in the Copper Corridor or all up there?
Yeah, well, we're still looking for all different sectors. Really, in the Copper Corridor, there's definitely more of a need for parents to get actively involved with the coalition. We have many that are working very hard to serve their youth and then others as well. But we know that, with an active role from the parents for the kids in the Copper Corridor, that's the number one reason why youth choose not to use substances, is because of the disapproval of their parents or not wanting to disappoint their parents. So the more of an active role they play in the coalition, the more successful that will be. And again, that's not just in the Copper Corridor, that's all over Arizona.
I was one of those children. I would never have disappointed my parents. It was just, not that they ever said it, but it was just how I felt about all they did for us and all they did for me. And it's interesting. But what about if you, for example, if you're a parent in a PTA, but you maybe don't have children who have those issues, do you find that other parents getting involved is also effective?
Yeah, absolutely. There's many ways that even if you're not a parent, you can get involved. If you go to AZYP.org, you can look by location and then find a local coalition that's working in your community. And then once you find that local coalition, we have volunteers that are involved where they give voluntary donations for programming or events that we put on. So that they may not have the time or energy, but they can provide that as a resource. We have those that like to volunteer at events as well. They can't always make the meetings, but they'll be at an event. And then we have others that are more actively involved. So it really can hit multiple dimensions, and whatever your need is and what you're wanting to do, I would say that would be a good first step, is just go to AZYP.org, search by location, get in contact. You'll see a contact for that local coalition. Okay. Let them know what you want to do or how you want to be involved, and then they'll take it from there.
That's great. Mm-hmm. And then on the show's site, on the podcast, all the information on how to contact these organizations will also be posted. So for any of the listeners who are coming up with some great volunteer ideas for 2022, and when you're looking at your New Year's resolution, here's some great options. So that's kind of fun. So I'm kind of curious on what are some of the current dangers you're finding in the Copper Corridor to kids?
That's a good question. So I would say probably one of the biggest dangers is fentanyl. Yeah. And unfortunately, we know the corridor is a highway for transportation. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of residents that have been involved even with transportation and going through these communities. So the kids really need to know what the dangers of fentanyl is, how strong it is. It's 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. But
I had no idea.
Yeah, but a lot of kids don't know. It just takes a few grains in order to overdose. And if they don't know what they're taking into their bodies, then that unfortunately could be it. And so you need to be educated on that. And of course, along with that, parents or anyone that engages youth, they need to be made aware of the dangers too. So what we do is we just were in a school a few days ago, and we provided the Rise of Fentanyl, which is a presentation that we give of the local dangers in our community, what they need to be aware of, the education, of course, on the drug, and what they can do to help prevent it and reduce youth use. But we also provide a Snapchat presentation as well, because many youth are getting their drugs from Snapchat, unfortunately.
Really?
Yes.
Gosh.
And parents are, many are unaware of how to even use Snapchat or to check that their youth may be getting drugs from Snapchat.
And forgive me because I'm beyond that stage of life, but is Snapchat the one that disappears after the message is given?
Yes.
So it's not a traceable thing, like for a parent, they can't go back and see, oh, there it is in a conversation in Facebook or a conversation in Instagram or on their cell phone in text. Well, that is interesting.
Yeah, there is, and you can see it in the presentation. If that's something that any listening in want to learn more about, and then again, that local coalition that they go to, they can provide this presentation and resources for free for parents, because there is a way for parents to see what their youth are doing. It teaches them about the language of Snapchat, the need to be able to get their login and passwords so they can see what they're sending their friends. So there's many ways they can prevent their youth from going down that rabbit hole.
Sure. Gosh, that's kind of scary, isn't it?
You know, it's interesting, having worked in the social services for the last 10 years or so. We were a pretty stable family, couple married. This is our anniversary, actually, 36 years. And
congratulations.
Grown kids like you. And often I listen to things and think, gosh, I wish I'd have had that resource, even though, everybody could use the resources you're talking about. I've sat in on foster care classes, and the things they teach you about parenting, I'm like, wow, I wish I could have had a class like that. Or, so many things that we just think, I don't know, there's such value in all of it for us. And we think maybe because our kids are in nicer schools or, like you said, higher socioeconomic, that they aren't going to be involved in that. But boy, users can find other users, and they can find drugs no matter where they're at. It's crazy.
Yes. And that's such a good point. And a lot of times there's a stigma for youth, and many will look at youth and then look at the risk factors behind them and say, well, there's a more likelihood of this youth using. However, if you just go on YouTube and you just type in overdose of fentanyl for use in Arizona, you'll have multiple stories of youth and parents. One of which, this kid was a gymnast, 17 years old, and he was doing well in school, very popular. But he overdosed on fentanyl. And so I think it's very important to not categorize, but to know that this is a danger for all youth. And if we're aware of that, then we can play an active role in helping to prevent it.
Sure. Well, and as you said, if it's just 2 grains of fentanyl can send someone into an overdose, and you can't see it because it's laced into something, correct? So really, it's 100% risk, whatever you do. We have this flyer in our brochure rack at Impact in the lobby about fishing. And this was something that I'm sure it's still being done. But at the time, I was just so amazed. And we publish a lot of information about how to get rid of your medications safely and all the drug disposal areas that are around town, and to take advantage of them, because kids were taking their medicine bottles out of their parents, or if they're grandparents, when they go to visit their grandparents and they take those drugs, then they would get together and have a party, and they dump all these colorful pills into a bowl so it looks like candy, and then just reach in and grab a handful of candy pills and throw 3 or 4 down. And I think about the things that are in seniors' medicine cabinets and even parents' medicine cabinets, and there's some dangerous combinations there. Mm-hmm. So it's, like you said, the risk is everywhere. And I can't imagine how, as a parent, you would, like you say, you can't see fentanyl. So things that seem innate really aren't.
Yeah, that's a great point too. So being aware of the dangers, how youth can come in to getting fentanyl. We know that in the Copper Corridor, and really in Arizona, a lot of youth, they got it at desert parties. That started to change a little bit, of course, with the pandemic when youth couldn't go out. So now we see the increase with social media, which is why youth are using it through Snapchat. So with keeping that in mind, we need to educate not just youth, but parents. And then they need the resources in order to prevent this. Like, for example, are parents locking up their medicine?
Yes.
Are they putting it in a safe place? Or are they leaving it out in the open for youth to be able to get to? Many youth, unfortunately, even in their rooms, they can hide substances. It can be an electrical socket. They need to be aware of what vape devices may look like. It can look like a USB drive.
Gosh.
Some are charged in their computer. So they need to be able to go into their room and understand what they're seeing, because it could look like an everyday item, and understand where to look.
Gosh, what great information you put out. I hope, is it on your website, out of curiosity, where you can just go click on a presentation maybe, or see some of this?
So it's that presentation. It's not actively on our website, but
Sure.
but once again, if you go to by location, you click on that coalition, the coordinator of that coalition can absolutely get you all the resources that you need, including the presentation, and would be happy to give it to you and also any friends and family.
There you go. I might be contacting you afterwards, because that just sounds like something Impact should be doing, making sure our families have access to it. Even as you were saying, Tiane, development, like what you learn, how you learn to be a parent, and the parenting skills and the things we all could have done better had we known some of those resources are out there. Because, of course, if you don't know that it exists, you don't know to look for it.
Right. And just like that 17-year-old, who 1 minute was great and then the next minute's dead. It takes that one mistake, and then you just wish you'd have known as a parent, or wish you'd have been more aware.
Oh, yeah, and it changes your family forever. Well, on that kind of heavy note, let's just take a quick break to hear from Skip, and we'll be back in a moment.
Today's program is brought to you by Skip, the Social Service Contractors Indemnity Pool. Skip is a member-owned, member-directed insurance provider with more than 3 decades of insuring Arizona social service organizations for their property, general and professional liability, and auto claim exposures. With an Arizona-based staff of claim underwriting and risk management professionals, Skip specializes in providing personalized service, affordable premiums, and coverage which meets and often exceeds the state of Arizona's contract requirements for social service providers. For more information, visit our website at www.sscip.org or ask your insurance agent about protecting your organization with insurance coverage through Skip.
Well, welcome back, and thank you again for tuning in to our show today. I'm here with Darien Mathews, who's the Coalition Coordinator in the Copper Corridor for Arizona Youth Partnership, teaching kids how to stay away from substance abuse. And we've been talking about that, and that's so important. And Tiane Kennedy, who is here with GAP Ministries. So Tiane, how about a little bit more about GAP? You were talking about the Miracle Center earlier, and how does that change lives, and who are they really directing their services toward?
I'm glad you brought that up, because we ended kind of heavy on the sad part about drugs. But one of the things at GAP that we've tried to do over the years, we started out our heart as kids, but we've discovered that if we can't get to the parents, we're just a vicious cycle of taking in foster kids forever, and it never ends. So we do certain things that are to get in front of the problem. Some of the poverty reduction things, like the warehouse and school feeding, to hopefully keep families from going to that point where they do start crashing and somebody starts using again, a dad or mom, and it falls apart and the kids go into foster care. But then also on the after side, some of the programs, one of them is Miracle Center, another is our job training programs. And those are, we deal with people that have made bad choices or things happened to them as children. They were sexually abused, and then the reactions to that were doing self-destructive things, whatever it was. And so Miracle Center is for women. We've had it before where it was men and women. I mean, separate buildings, obviously. But right now we just have women. We'd like to have men again. It's just a financial issue. But they come into Miracle Center for 18 months. So it's transitional living. They do AA. They do, of course, it's faith-based. So there's a lot of that's involved in it because we believe that without coming to a realization of who you are, who God created you to be, how unique you are, how you are special and one of a kind, it's pretty hard to overcome some of those things. So they have that types of counseling. They do job training. They do just a number of things. It's very customized for each woman so that when they graduate, they can go off and be successful. And it's had, I don't know the percentages of success, but just in the time they've been under us and seeing the women. Last year we had all the women in the house. There's 7 usually. All of them passed their 1 year sober, got their 1 year sober.
Wonderful. Which
is a big, big deal. You know, if you can make it a year, your chances of recidivism are very much improved. And have gone on to do other things. It's just really a joy to see. And then the job training program, we work with a lot of people. We started that program thinking it was going to be for our youth aging out who weren't college bound.
Sure.
To give them another opportunity to do culinary since we have the Gap Kitchen. But what it's turned out to be primarily is people coming out of incarceration and drug addiction programs, which a lot of times go hand in hand. And so that's been really interesting because you don't realize it till you begin working with that group of people how much they touch the foster care system. Either they were in the foster care system as children.
Interesting.
Or they're parents whose kids are in the foster care system because they're in jail, in prison. So that's been really neat to see people come out and get back with their kids, get hope again. I think that's one of the most important things. If people have hope, they can do just about anything, and they can overcome just about anything, and they're willing to put in the work. If you don't have hope, it's hard to make yourself do it. There's no reason.
Sure. We agree.
Yeah,
Impact,
you know. So once you see it in their eyes, I've enjoyed the culinary program. It's 10 weeks, 40 hours a week. And with children, I always tell people with children, it's a long haul. So you have kids in foster care. You might not see till they come back. We had a bunch of kids come back for our 20th, about a dozen come back that are now married, have their own kids and telling their stories. And you're so encouraged, like, all right, they made it. And they're doing good. But it's a long, long haul. With the culinary program, it's 10 weeks. So you kind of have this microcosm of people coming in that just look like, whatever. You know, here we go again, another program. And about halfway through, you see them they're smiling a lot. Their shoulders are held back. They have a look in their face like this could actually work. And then when they go through graduation, when I've gone to their graduations, it's so much fun to be there because families are there for them. They're dressed up. The little girls are in their Easter dresses, or whatever. And they've got balloons and posters and cards. And it's like you think this is a person, the only time their whole family was ever around was probably at their sentencing or, they were the kids that always were in trouble or the adults. And
sure,
it's so fun to see them come out and actually do well and
be
get
celebrated.
A job. Yeah. Get a job, get a house, start making something of their lives and saying, okay, I've messed it up for 34 years or whatever, but I can do this. So that's been really neat to see.
That is nice to have that do-over, if you will.
Yeah.
We had a woman that we helped who'd come through a transitional housing program, and it was the same thing. We provided her some furniture and some things, and she was, like you say, she was so excited and so motivated for this change in her life, and it was really a fun thing to be there to support. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty cool program.
Yeah, even with the kids, I think it's just seeing other people, how they live, like with the kids that come into our group homes, and see how other families interact. Mm-hmm. Oh, you sit at the table and eat? Or, we've had kids come in and they're so excited because they each get their own toothbrush. Things that we just as normal people take for granted that, So, but then if you get to observe it, okay, this is how people act. This is what they do. This is what families do that, and it gives you a chance for a different way of raising your kids and being than how you were raised.
Sure. We have a funny family story that we tell, and one of our children, his friend came over and had dinner, and it was just the normal routine for us. And then he went home, and his mother called laughing, and she said, he sat around the table the next night, and they didn't always have time to have family dinner because they were in sports and they were coming and going all the time. And he said, I'd like to try something that the McClures do that's really fun and kind of interesting. And she's like, what is that? I think they probably thought we cooked something wonky. And he said, they actually say, would you please pass the butter? And, it was such a funny thing because in our house that was so natural. But to your point, this little guy was so enamored by it. And so he asked his family if they could politely ask to have things passed around the table.
Instead of just reaching across and grabbing it or whatever.
Just exactly. So it's kind of funny. But again, to your point, it's just a different experience. And in our house, we always say it's all about experience and exposure. Mm-hmm. And I think all of us who are working with people who are struggling know that there's a lot of experience and exposure they've never had. Mm-hmm. And so how do we get that as a resource, and then it changes their lives? And I want to mention, because I know you have a lot of success with your culinary program, and a lot of your students who've gone through that are now working in big Tucson restaurants, aren't they?
It's been exciting. We've had several that have, a number of them that have gone to the Sands Club at the U of A.
Sure.
And we had a gal at Sinai Thai, and Sinai Thai closed, unfortunately, during COVID, but that chef was a tough chef to work under. You had to be on top of it and really good to be with her. We've had a pasta, one of our ladies, it was the pasta chef, I think she still is, up at Dove Mountain. So, they've been all over Charro Steak, and, they're trained well, and we've found that we've been teaching them things that you think people would know, but a lot of people in our society don't know anymore, even just kids from our own families, how to leave a job correctly. You don't don't show up the next day because I hate this job and I'm not coming in tomorrow. You give them 2 weeks notice and, do it the right way. Things like that, looking people in the eyes, just so many things that we all don't learn as much as we used to, I think.
Sure. I think that's true. Do you find that, Darien, and the kids you work with?
Yeah.
Different life skill set?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of manners that really have been lost. Mm-hmm. It's, again, kind of a lost art, to speak to your point. And unfortunately, as generations pass, you're seeing that less and less. And that's a big thing that we're trying to instill in the kids, too. It's not a matter of just staying away from what may negatively impact their life, but it's helping them to become more mature, responsible adults so they can then serve their communities. That's a big part of our youth coalition. And it all starts with us seeing the best in them.
Sure.
And there's an approach, and this is from adverse childhood experiences, where you can look at it as salutogenic or pathogenic, where pathogenic, you look at all the problems. Salutogenic, you see the best in the kid. You look at their strengths. And then you can start to build those skills that they need, the manners that they need, because then they'll be open to listening. That's a big goal with our youth coalitions in Arizona.
I think it's really important. Impact has an initiative they're launching in January, and it's putting people to work. And so it's the same kind of thing, like you said, Tiane. It's another program, and so how's it going to be successful? How's it going to be different than anything before? But that's part of what we're looking at. Is it's one thing to get the job, to land the job, and now you have to have all those skills to keep it, and all those experiences and exposures that haven't been part of your life, especially if you've been a shift worker. Like you say, you wake up and you don't want to go to work. There's so many other people who can fill in your shift. You're eager for your hours, so you don't come, and then you come another day. And so it's an interesting thing. But like you're saying, Darien, you have to help them understand. You have to see where their strengths are and then help them get there and then fill in the gaps. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do. I think the community is very fortunate to have all these nonprofits that are helping so much, and what a difference your two organizations are making for so many people, children and others alike. I know we're coming up on the end of the year, so I'm sure everybody wants to make a plug for the Arizona tax credit. So I know, Darien, you must be qualified for that, AZYP.
Yeah, so it's you absolutely can go to azyp.org and you can donate. And as was mentioned, that's part of the Arizona tax credit. That's one way that you can donate, and then you can receive back, from what you put in. But then there's something else that's coming up too,
sure,
and that's Give Tuesday, that's coming up on November 30th, and that started in 2012, and that I think what we were all talking about is just showing kindness, and that's really what that day is all about, and giving back to your community. So if you go to azyp.org, right there on the homepage, you'll see Give Tuesday, and if you click it, then that's another way that you can donate, and then it once again goes to our programs, it goes to our youth to help them to have a bright and successful future.
Well, it sounds like they can certainly use it. I'm sure all those kids, and what a great opportunity to help the kids in the Copper Corridor. Thank you. How about you, Tiane? I know you've got foster care, so you must have an added bonus there for families.
We do. So we're fortunate, too, because we don't have as much competition. There's so many charitable organizations that you guys all have to people have to choose between. In the foster care tax credit, I believe there's only about 5 or 6 that are local, that are Pima County, Southern Arizona. So, and you can give to both. You can give to charitable and to foster care and to the school tuition. So you, depending on how much you pay in state taxes or basically your liability, people always say, well, I don't pay anything in state taxes. I get money back. But you did pay state taxes. You just overpaid your state taxes. That's why you get money back. But you can give to all of them. So you can really make a difference. And we are very dependent on that. What we're paid by the state to care for the kids is the bare minimum. And it was care for their basic needs. But we really have always believed, why would we treat these kids any different than we treat our own kids? That's always been the philosophy. That's why our houses are lovely. We try to make them feel honored and respected and get the prom dress that every other little girl has, every other teen girl has, or just so many things like that. So that's a big one people can help us with. And then we do have a lot of things coming up end of year that people, if they're interested, and I gave you some of those links, but we need Christmas gifts for our visitation families. So those are the families whose kids are in foster care. They're doing all the things they're supposed to be doing to get their families reunited, getting the help they need. And we throw a Christmas party for them, but we like to have presents that they can go pick out ahead of time and wrap so they don't have to spend their own money, which sometimes means not paying an electric bill, something like that, so they can get their kids Christmas presents. And so that's one way people can help. We need some bakers. We need about 100 sugar cookies. So there's different things like that, too. People can help out in different ways. And I listed some of those. There's so many. When I reached out to all the different people at GAP, all the different directors of different areas, they gave me a laundry list. So I've got 2 pages here. I could read all of them, but they can go to our website and see, because besides the money, there's just volunteer hours coming in and helping us out and doing different things. So
that's neat. And then I know you have something coming up, your new building. Yes. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes, you're right. This is going to be, we haven't announced it to very many people yet. It's just happening. We close mid to end of December on new property. It's going to be at Prince and I-10, so it's still in the 85705 area, which is a very low income. There's a lot of foster kids that come out of this area. We purposely want to stay in that area, and we're going to own it. We've been in a 10-year lease with the place that we're at currently, and we're going to save over half of what we pay now in lease by owning.
Isn't that great?
So we're really excited about that. We'll start moving in January. We've got all of 2022 to move over all our operations, which is going to be quite a big job. I'm glad it's not my responsibility. All I have to do is worry about my office. But yeah, it's going to be amazing. I think we're going to be able to expand our services. We'll be able to do things we can't do now because the person we lease from doesn't allow it in their property because there's other people around. So we're really excited about it. And people, it's called Campus of Hope. And if anybody wants to get involved in that, either a monthly pledge or one-time donation, or if they know family foundations or their business would like to be a part of it, we're going to need all hands on deck to get it in the shape it needs to be in. It's pretty rough, but we're excited.
And then when do you plan to move in? You plan to be completely in? It takes a couple of years to put a program like that together.
Well, we have to be out of the one we're in now by the end of 2022.
Oh, you do?
That's when our lease is up. So there's 4 buildings on the property. 3 of the buildings are, pretty good. It needs cosmetics and it needs some things. We have our wish list of what we'd like, but we can get into it as they are with a little bit of carpeting and paint. But the one building where the Gap Kitchen will go and the job training programs, that building needs a complete remodel. So basically we're fundraising this year to get that building built out so that we can get everybody over there. And then for another 3 years, trying to get it to where we want it, where it looks nice. And we have a parking lot, not dirt, and some things like that.
It takes time, doesn't it, to get all the pieces put together. Well, I'm trying to think, is there anything else? How about you, Darien? Do you have anything else going on for the end of the year or coming up big that we'd like to get a plug in on?
Well, I did want to clarify because I know we were talking a lot about the Copper Corridor, and for all those listening in,
sure.
AZYP originally started in Pima County,
yes,
right, and then expanded to rural communities. So, we're in 28 different school districts, 11 different counties, 22 different communities. So, when you go to the website, there are a lot of different coalitions you can get involved in. And we are excited to continue our programming. I know there are some that are involved with like health education days. We look forward to doing that and bringing resources from the county into our smaller rural communities. We're looking to potentially do that in January and February to provide resources not just for the students, the teachers, but then also the parents all on one night.
That's nice. And I'm glad you brought that up because that's true. AZYP is all over. And I remember when you opened an office in Kingman and thought, Kingman, my gosh, that's so far away. So that's a good point. AZYP is everywhere. So like you said, that's a lot of school districts. Mm-hmm. So parents might even be surprised to find that AZYP is active in their school.
Yes. Yes.
So that would be an interesting look into their website to see what's up. Well, I want to thank you both for being here. It's been a wonderful day and wish you both happy holidays. And thank you for all you do for our families in the Pima County and as well as Pinal and all over the state, really. You're affecting a lot of people everywhere. Thank you for being here, and we'll say goodbye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.